I live in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of Tennessee, the kind with trimmed hedges, porch flags, retirees walking their dogs in the morning, and the occasional HOA board meeting that nobody actually wants to attend. From the outside, you'd think it's the kind of place where nothing exciting ever happens. But the day two self-proclaimed HOA enforcement officers tried to barge into my home and seize my legally owned shotguns was the day they learned something they should have checked before stepping onto my porch. See, I'm not your average homeowner. I trained the U.S. Army Rangers. And what they mistook for an old man sipping coffee on his porch was a storm wrapped in skin. It all started on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting on the porch, cup of black coffee in hand, reading a dog-eared copy of On Killing by Lt. Colonel Dave Grossman, a book I often recommend to my students. The neighborhood was peaceful. Birds chirping. The lawn freshly cut. My old lab, Boomer, lying lazily at my feet. Then I saw them. Two men in cheap tactical vests, dark aviator sunglasses, and what looked like dollar store badges clipped to their belts. Their truck had no official markings, just HOA Patrol Unit, written in vinyl letters that looked like they'd been printed in someone's garage. Something was off. They parked across the street, stepped out like they were in an episode of Cops, and walked straight toward my home with clipboards in hand and walkie-talkies that didn't even squawk. One of them, the taller one, had the kind of overcompensating swagger you only get from someone who's never seen a real fight but watches UFC religiously. They didn't knock. They banged. 5 hard thuds on my front door, enough to rattle the frame. Boomer raised his head and growled low. I stood up slow, set my coffee down, and walked to the door. Before I even opened it, I heard them talking, loud enough for me to catch every arrogant word. This the guy with the firearms? Got a notice last week. Yeah. The HOA banned all non-hunting weapons. Dude's in violation. Time to collect. I opened the door. Morning, I said, calm and casual. Can I help you too? The tall one looked me up and down like I was a suspect. Yeah, we're with the HOA Enforcement Division. We received reports that you're in possession of unregistered firearms in violation of Neighborhood Ordinance 12B. I raised an eyebrow. Unregistered. Specifically shotguns, he added, nodding like this was supposed to scare me. We're here to confiscate them. I almost laughed. Instead, I said, You boys got a warrant? The short one stepped forward, waving a laminated paper like it meant something. We don't need a warrant. This is private HOA property, and you agreed to the rules when you moved in. I took the paper, looked it over, and chuckled. Seizure authorization under Emergency Neighborhood Safety Act? Who wrote this? Your mom. They didn't like that. Tall guy bristled. Sir, failure to comply will result in criminal charges, potential arrest, and the HOA taking further legal action against your property. Now, I'd kept my cool up to this point. But there's a certain tone of voice, that condescending blend of arrogance and ignorance, that flips a switch in my head. That's when I smiled. Not the friendly kind. The kind that says, you just stepped on a landmine, and you don't even know it yet. I looked them dead in the eye and said, You have exactly 10 seconds to get off my property. The tall guy laughed. Or what? I stepped back into the house without a word and closed the door. Now, for the record, my shotguns are legal. Registered. Locked in a biometric safe. Stored properly. I'm not some conspiracy nut hoarding weapons for the apocalypse. But I am someone who's trained more than 3,000 U.S. Army Rangers in close-quarter combat, breaching tactics, and advanced urban warfare. I've taught 23-year-olds how to clear buildings in Afghanistan and survive ambushes in Syria. And these two cosplay commandos? They were playing a game they didn't understand. I unlocked the cabinet, pulled out my phone, hit a button. See, my home's wired with 4K surveillance, inside and out. Every angle, every word they said, recorded. And not just stored locally. Synced to a cloud server with backup redundancy in 3 states. I called my contact, a retired JAG officer who owes me more than a few favors. Told him what was happening. He said, send the footage. I'll call the sheriff myself. 10 minutes later, I was back on the porch. The 2 fake officers were still there, now poking around my flower bed like it hid a weapons cache. I stepped outside. You boys ever hear of U.S. Title 18, Section 912? They blinked. What? It's the federal law against impersonating a government official. Penalty, up to 3 years in prison. Short guy turned pale. Tall guy tried to bluster. We're HOA authorized. We don't fall under that. Wrong again, I said. Because there is no such thing as an HOA enforcement officer. Not under the law. And even if there was, that wouldn't give you the right to enter my home or seize anything without a court order. Then came the real fun. 2 sheriff's cruisers rolled up, lights flashing. Deputies stepped out, real ones, with real badges and real authority. Sir, one of them nodded at me. We got a call about some impersonators harassing a homeowner? I pointed. Right there. Tall guy's bravado vanished like steam. Short guy tried to run. Didn't get far. One of the deputies tackled him in the grass like it was Friday night football. The other cuffed the tall one, who finally found some humility. They were both charged on the spot, impersonating law enforcement, attempted unlawful entry, harassment, and attempting to execute an unauthorized seizure of private property. Turns out, they weren't even on the HOA board. Just 2 neighbors who thought they could play vigilante and bully people into giving up their rights. The HOA tried to distance itself fast. Released a statement saying these men acted independently, and that no policy exists regarding private firearm ownership within the community. But the damage was done. And the lesson was clear. Don't knock on a man's door demanding his weapons, when that man has trained the very people who run night raids in enemy territory. Don't try to intimidate someone who stared down insurgents and lived through IED blasts. And most of all, don't mistake quiet for weak. After the incident, I got a letter from the real HOA, apologizing, promising better vetting procedures for anyone claiming authority. I didn't bother replying, because some people don't need to write back. Sometimes you just let your silence and the law do the talking. Now, things are quiet again. Boomer still naps on the porch. The neighbors wave a little more nervously. And I go back to my coffee and my books, knowing full well that while peace is beautiful, it's only possible when wolves know there's another wolf watching the door. Moral of the story? If someone tries to intimidate you into surrendering your rights, stand tall. Know the law. Be calm. Be smart. But if they cross the line, make sure they remember you. And if you happen to train warriors for a living, maybe remind them, you're not the one who should be afraid. They are.